All right, so we're diving into some pretty interesting stuff happening in Sri Lankan politics. We've gotten a ton of articles from you about this controversy going on in the ruling party. And it looks like you guys really want to get to the bottom of these accusations and what it all means for Sri Lanka going forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a case that really brings up those big questions about public trust, And like, how legitimate is this government, especially since they promised a clean break from the past?
You're talking about the NPP, right? I mean, they had a huge win in the 2024 elections, ended up with like a two-thirds majority in parliament. It really did feel like a big shift in Sri Lankan politics.
Absolutely. Yeah. People were ready for a change, and the NPP totally tapped into that.
Yeah.
They were all about transparency and accountability during their campaign. So when they won the presidential election in September and then the parliamentary elections in November, it felt like a mandate. Like the public was saying, okay, it's time for something new.
But then, just a few months in, we have the Speaker of Parliament, Asoka Sapumal Ranwala, resigning. And it's all because of these allegations of academic fraud. So what exactly are people accusing him of?
So he claimed to have a PhD in biochemistry from Waseda University in Japan, and also a degree in chemical engineering from the University of Moratuwa in Sri Lanka. But Fact Crescendo and a bunch of other journalists, they've been looking into it, and they're saying there are some pretty big doubts about whether these degrees are real.
Okay, so what makes them think that? Like, is there evidence that he might have just made these degrees up?
Well, think about it. His LinkedIn profile vanished into thin air as soon as these allegations came out. And then the Parliament website was super quick to take Dr. Cowlid off of his name. Those are pretty suspicious moves, even if they don't prove anything, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if there's nothing to hide, why react so fast, right? What about this thing with his daughter? She's saying he does have a PhD, but just can't find the certificate.
Right. That's weird, right? Why wouldn't you be able to find something that important? Plus, Waseda University, they've looked through the records, and they say there's no sign of Ranwala ever getting a doctorate there. No thesis, no alumni record, nothing. So it's not looking good for him.
And it's not like we're talking about some minor position here.
Yeah.
The Speaker of Parliament, that's a big deal in Sri Lanka's government, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Huge. The speaker's the one who keeps things running smoothly in Parliament, make sure everyone follows the rules during debates and all that. But Ranwala was also the head of the Constitutional Council. That's the group that picks people for really important jobs, like judges and other top officials. So his honesty, or lack of it, could impact the whole government.
So this isn't just some personal scandal, it sounds like. Nirmal Dewasiri, a lecturer at the University of Colombo, even called this a litmus test for the NPP government. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, he's saying that this whole situation is going to show everyone what the NPP is really made of. Are they going to brush this under the rug to protect one of their own? Or will they actually stick to their promises of transparency and accountability, even if it means admitting one of their guys messed up?
That's a good point. So how's the public reacting to all this?
A lot of people are really worried. Academics, political parties, regular people, they're all saying they feel let down. Like they thought things were finally going to change and now this happens. There's a lot of pressure for a serious investigation. People want to see the NPP take real action, not just talk.
And what about the opposition party, the SJB? How are they playing this?
They're definitely using this to their advantage, trying to make the NPP look bad. They've even started a no-confidence motion against Ranwala. Basically, it's a way to try and force him out of office if they can get enough votes in Parliament.
But the NPP has such a huge majority, right? Like 159 seats. Does the SJB really think they can pull that off?
It's a long shot for sure. I mean, Namal Karunaratne, the deputy minister, he's already said they're not worried at all. They know they have the numbers. He's even said the SJB is wasting their time with this.
So the NPP doesn't seem too concerned about this no-confidence motion. But what makes this whole thing even more crazy is Ranwala's history. Right? He was one of the leaders of those protests against SAITM, that private medical school that got shut down a few years ago.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Totally. And get this, Ranwala was calling SAITM a fake degree awarding institute. Now, fast forward a few years, and he's being accused of the exact same thing.
Talk about irony, huh? Some people are calling it karma, a political boomerang. It definitely makes you wonder if he's a hypocrite, or if maybe this whole thing is just a symptom of something bigger going wrong in Sri Lankan politics.
It's like something out of a play or something. This twist of fate makes you think, doesn't it? Like, maybe this whole scandal is because people in Sri Lanka care too much about having fancy degrees, even if they're not real. Like, they see education as a way to get ahead, not about actually learning.
That's a really interesting point. Maybe this is just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a much deeper problem. Makes you think about how much we value education, right? And how easily it can be twisted for personal gain.
And now it's come out that at least 3 other NPP parliamentarians are facing the same accusations. This is getting bigger by the day.
Oh, yeah, things are about to get even more interesting. So, yeah, it's not just Ranwala anymore. The SJB parliamentarian, Rohini Kumari Kaviratne, she's actually named 2 other ministers who she says have been lying about their degrees.
How are they?
Anura Karunathilake, he's the urban development and housing minister, and Kumar Jayakody, he is in charge of energy.
And didn't something happen with Karuna Thilik's title on like a government website or something?
Yeah, so get this. On the ministry website, his title was professor, but then all of a sudden they changed it to just Mr. It could be nothing, but with everything else going on, it definitely raises some eyebrows.
Yeah, it does seem a little fishy, right? Especially since the MPP, their whole thing was about bringing a new kind of politics to Sri Lanka. Getting rid of all the corruption and making the government more accountable.
Exactly, and that's what makes this whole thing so bad for them. If they don't handle it well, it could totally destroy their credibility. Like, all those promises they made about being different, well, this kind of makes it look like they're just like the old guard.
It's like the classic do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. And people are definitely picking up on that. So what can they even do at this point? Like, how can they win back the public's trust?
Well, they could just try to ignore it, pretend it's not a big deal and hope it all goes away on its own. Maybe say the opposition is just making stuff up.
But wouldn't that just make people more suspicious? Like they're trying to hide something?
Totally, yeah. Especially these days, everyone's online. Information gets around so fast. If they try to sweep this under the rug, it's going to blow up in their faces.
So then what's the other option? How can they actually show they're serious about being transparent?
They have to be proactive. They need a real investigation, one that's independent and looks at all these allegations, no matter who's involved. And then they have to make the findings public, even if it means some important people look bad. And if anyone's guilty of wrongdoing, they need to be held accountable, even if they're, high up in the party.
That would definitely send a strong message, right? Like they're not messing around.
Right, and it would show they actually care about doing what's right, even if it hurts them politically. That could actually make people respect them more in the long run.
But what if the investigation finds even more problems? Wouldn't that just make their reputation worse?
It's definitely a risk, but it's a risk worth taking, in my opinion. Because the alternative, like we were saying, is trying to hide everything, and that's almost guaranteed to backfire.
It's a tough spot for them to be in, for sure.
Yeah, it's a real dilemma. This whole situation is going to force them to show their true colors. Are they really reformers? Or are they just another group of politicians who want power more than anything else?
This really shows that even in a democracy, staying transparent and holding people accountable is a constant struggle.
Absolutely. It shows how important it is for people to stay engaged and informed and to keep pushing their leaders to do the right thing.
And to have a free press that can do their job without being afraid to investigate and report on these kinds of things.
Right, exactly. What's happening in Sri Lanka right now, it's happening all over the world. People are losing trust in their institutions. We're bombarded with misinformation. And it's harder than ever to make sure people in power are acting ethically.
These are problems that affect all of us, no matter where we live.
It's true. This whole Ranwala scandal started in Sri Lanka, but what it represents is so much bigger than just one country.
So what's next for Sri Lanka? Will this bring down the NPP and their plans for reform? Or will people just lose faith in the whole idea of democracy?
It's hard to say for sure, but there's no question that what the NPP decides to do next will have a huge impact on Sri Lanka and its people.
And for millions of people who just want a better future for their country.
It's definitely not over yet. We'll have to wait and see what happens next.
Well, for our listeners who have been following along with us, what's the big takeaway here? What should they be thinking about as this story develops?
I think it shows us how important it is to be skeptical. We can't just assume that everything we're told is true, even if it seems official. We have to question things, demand evidence, and expect transparency from our leaders.
And a free press is more important now than ever. Journalists need to be able to do their jobs and hold powerful people accountable.
And I think the most important thing is to remember that we all have a responsibility to make sure things are done ethically. Not just in our own lives, but in our communities and in our institutions.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. We've learned a lot, but I have a feeling there's still a lot more to uncover.
I agree. We've just scratched the surface. There's a whole other layer to this story. connecting this scandal to the bigger issue of academic integrity in Sri Lanka.
Okay, so we've talked about the politics of it all, but let's zoom out a bit. This whole thing, what does it say about academic honesty in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, it does make you think. Like, if people at the top are faking their degrees, what kind of message does that send to students?
Right. It's like saying it's okay to cheat your way to the top. And what about the people who actually worked hard to get their degrees? It's like their accomplishments don't even matter anymore.
And it's not just about individuals, right? It shows that the system for checking credentials might be broken. Like, are there even any safeguards in place? Can anyone just say they have a degree and nobody checks?
So maybe this is a chance for Sri Lanka to take a good hard look at how it handles academic credentials. Like, rethink the whole system, make it more transparent, and make sure people can't get away with this kind of fraud.
I think so. They need better ways to make sure degrees are real and a culture where honesty is valued. And it has
Yeah.
to start early on, with students and educators.
It's like a wake-up call, not just for Sri Lanka, but for everyone, right?
Hmm,
Even in countries with good systems, there are always people trying to cheat. We have to be careful.
absolutely. This kind of academic fraud happens all the time, all over the world. We need to share information, come up with new ways to catch these fakers, and basically work together to protect the value of education.
So for our listeners, the ones who have been really digging into this story with us, what's the big lesson here? What should they keep in mind as this all plays out?
I think the main takeaway is don't take things at face value. Even if something seems official, it's okay to be skeptical. Ask questions, demand proof, especially from people in power.
And we can't forget about the media, right?
Yeah.
They have to keep digging, keep reporting, and keep holding these guys accountable.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's on all of us. We have to demand ethical behavior from ourselves and from our leaders.
This deep dive has been really fascinating. We've learned a lot, but I'm sure there's more to come as this story unfolds.
I agree. This is just the beginning.
Well, we'll be here to keep you updated. In the meantime, stay curious, everyone.